So, hello everybody. My name is Luke McBain. Today I'm sitting here together with Ben Hennessy-Garside, and we're talking about the Liminal Farm. And this has been something we just we're talking about that this was something which was going on for a complete year, slightly more for a year, a process. And yeah, I think you came up with the idea to say, okay, let's talk about what the Liminal Farm is and what happened in that year.
What was going on?
What was
Yeah.
going on? And yeah, well, let's see how many sessions we'll do and how much time this needs. And today we're just going to start off and see where this conversation takes us.
Yeah, that's great. Very much in the spirit of the thing, right? Just let's see how it goes.
Right.
So, should we talk about the beginning? Is that what you think?
Yeah, well, we can start with the beginning, I guess. That would be the proper thing to do. I guess it's not it's not usually the sort of like this linear way of approaching things, sort of like explaining things, how they are built and all that isn't really the Liminal Farm, is it? But we'll have to we'll have to like try to at least explain ourselves a little bit, and maybe we can later on dive into the liminal itself and let it do some explaining for us. Who knows?
Sounds great.
Yeah, anyway, I think like 1.5 years ago, something like that, we both were in this Game B community space on Facebook. I don't know if we need now to explain what Game B is. Probably you're much better in explaining that than I am. And yeah, I think. Well, I posted something on combining the pragmatic emotional with the emotional. Oh no, I'm sorry. The pragmatic rational with the emotional spiritual, and then I think Nathan said something like, "Okay, what are you talking about? Let's have an online meeting." With a big online meeting with I think about 15 people. And that didn't go too well. And then Nathan again messaged me and said something like, "Was that what you were thinking about?" And I said, "No, not at all. I found it rather annoying." And he said, "Why don't we meet again?" And I said, "Yeah, I would like to have that together with Ben and Heather." And then we just met up and went on this journey. So that's how things started.
Yeah. I suppose all I would add into that is there was some discussions on the Game B forum about art and creativity, and that there was something about that as well, like the creation, the creativity side of it, and quite a few people are on that big old discussion we had, and there was, I mean, it was probably doomed to kind of no, fail's the wrong word, because like we got what we got and people got what they got, but it felt a little bit messy, didn't it? Right, that because there were so many of us on the call, but all the people that were there were interested in this question of art, I think. So that there was something about, because that was also one of the features for me why I was attracted, because there's precisely because of this thing that we talk about with there can be, although there was, at least at the time around the Game B Facebook group, there seemed to be quite a lot of like kind of coders, and there were quite a few people who were kind of quite there was quite a lot of rationalizing, a lot of reasoning around lots of arguments, and this, the kind of more, what it ended up becoming, what the group ended up becoming, was this attempt to try and live between that like you say, the rational pragmatic and this more spiritual, this kind of more spiritual place, and the artistic process, like combining what comes to one with developing and practicing some kind of skill that feels a little more linear, seems to somehow sit over the top of that fairly well, I think. So this artification, poeticizing, these are kind of some themes, aren't they, that we've had some fun with over the past 12 months, in my opinion.
I mean, I think you really said it already, so we can stop for today. I think
Oh, is that it? Is that
yeah,
that?
that's it.
Yeah.
Like, there's nothing really to add.
Okay.
Yeah, there is this. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there is this impetus to try to get at the relevancy of art again, right? This desire to try to see how. I mean, you as a musician, as an artist, and Heather as an artist, and me having also some artistic background, like as a film student, as a former film student and director and actor and all that.
Yep.
I think we feel deeply about, and Nathan also with his music, we feel deeply that, you know, art has something much more to say about our lives and the world we live in than apart from the artifact itself. So apart from the music, the painting, the movie.
Right.
And so, and I'm guessing this, but I don't think any artist will disagree with me that most artists do feel that connection, and that's why they do it, because they can feel that art provides them with meaning and with this sense of wholeness. And so I think that's why we came together, is that we sensed also that, yeah, there could be more of that in the world. This meaningful quality of wherever that comes from, and how could that be possible? Like how could that be made available? Or we were interested in expanding that quality. As you said, yeah, this space in between. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And I also want to throw something else in, Luke, which you brought, which was because obviously I know you've, well, I hope it's okay that I mention it, but you've done some kind of business consultancy and some work in like leadership, and I was really intrigued, and still am, by this notion of leadership as an art form, and often that piece, you felt, at least when in discussions with you, was the art was often kind of missing from the leadership field, and I think that am I is that a fair thing to say? I'm not
No,
misjudging?
not at all. I've been working on that for some time, and but there's a few limitations to that as well. So one point is, and I think that's why our group really worked well for a year, is that we came together. Okay, we're interested in something, right? So, and it's clear to us, or it was clear to us as a group of 4 people, that whatever we're setting out to explore, we have to do it without any conditions or any preconceived notions of what we do know about the world. And so I mean, it has some interesting spin-offs. What we did is also for leadership research and consultancy and coaching and all that. And it certainly helped me, you know, to develop some coaching practices and all. But it seems to go beyond that.
Yes.
So I think why the first meeting with the bigger group didn't quite work out is what you said, is that we have this tendency to speak from the known, right? So we have that baggage of things which we do know something about, which we've studied intently, and we would like other people to listen to what we know and what makes us maybe unique in that sense, in our expertise and all that. But that's not what I was setting out to look into, and I think that's what, you know, made our group cohesive, is that we all realized, okay, that's good if you have that sort of like knowledge, codified knowledge, but we're not looking for that. We're looking for the point which starts always from the unknown, from the moment, to assume, like in art, that there is something which is produced from that moment of not knowing, of being in the moment, and that also has value. certainly it has value if you have a certain you know amount of knowledge, expertise about a certain area. It could be engineering, can be anything, physics. That's fine. It could be also music, and you apply that, and it's absolutely useful. But we were looking for something different, and still claiming that coming from that point is also valuable, no matter what you work in. And yeah, I think that was a good thing. So yeah, just coming back to the question of leadership, yeah, I've researched leadership and so on and so forth. But it was clear to me, even yeah, if I I also have to leave things behind as we step into that space of experiment. So every
Yes.
time you step into that space of experiment, you have to leave your stuff behind.
Yeah. Yeah. A few more words to add to that. It's emergence, and noticing rather than trying to. So almost like seeing what's there, what's coming up, rather than trying to always impose a predetermined idea about what's going to be said or felt or experienced. There's something kind of improvisatory about it, and open. And so I suppose all of these words kind of point in the kind of direction, don't they? For kind of what we were after. Yeah. So then what happened? That feels like the next question.
I think these preconditions, if you want to call them that, even when I remember distinctly when we started about a year ago, that they were important to us, and I think we talked about them a couple of times. That we said it's so important to start from a point where you're more interested in what could happen to you in that moment than repeating those things which you already know or have experienced. And so that's not, yeah, that is, maybe that's why I'm just repeating it now. I think that's so important. And just recently we talked also about some coaching experience which I have, or working as a coach. And I think in therapy it's quite similar, is that point where the client has to stop knowing all the answers, right? And has to come to a point to say, okay, I really don't know what to do now. And that's why I'm coming to you. So I think that's where the work really starts as a coach, or I'm not a therapist, but I could imagine that's also where the work starts as a therapist. If somebody comes to you and says, I don't know, I tried everything, it's not working. What do I do? So you don't give the answer, but you notice that, okay, this is interesting. Like that's an interesting question. That's an interesting place that's an exciting place to start.
Yeah.
It's not so exciting to talk to somebody as a client, which I also have, who knows all the answers, right? And is very clever and very distinguished and all that. That's not so, there's no adventure in that. Where's the adventure? Where's the excitement? Where's the moment? So I think that, just to reiterate that, and starting from that point, I think there, especially at the beginning there, I think we always had some form of agreement. And I think the first agreement was, okay, what are we doing here, speaking metaphorically? No, it was one point before that. See, we're getting ahead of ourselves. I think we were sort of going on. So, okay, let's say we're coming together to develop a set of practices. We're interested in some sort of practice development of meaning making. So our assumption is this is what we're going to do. We're this group of people. We're interested in doing that. But so how do we explore that? And we said, okay, let's explore that metaphorically as a group. And that's how we came up with the term farm and model farm. And I mean, that was a process. It didn't happen immediately, but it was like a iterative process in which we develop this metaphor, this metaphorical space, this communal joint space in which this farm then developed as a place. And it's difficult to explain, because I'm sure anybody who's listening now is going like, what are they talking about? What's going on?
Yeah,
and
I love the weirdness of it all, though. That's all part of it, huh?
So we're trying to explain something which is hard. You can't really explain because you have to experience it, which is the same thing as talking about art and doing art. It's not the same thing. So we have to work with these analogies also now in these recordings. Sometimes we'll see, we will go into a practice here ourselves, is we have to use these analogies to even make that understood in some way.
Well, the farm, it started out as a garden, didn't it?
Yeah,
that was the metaphor. And I think it might have, there was some, I missed the very first meeting. I couldn't make it, and I don't know if you'd already begun doing what was at least a precursor to what we then came to know as metaphorical thinking. But something seemed to have happened between you all that felt quite special. I remember there being some document, I think you'd produced it actually, about a river of some kind, and then different, and I don't know if that was a discussion about metaphor that got to that. I mean, I actually don't know that much about it. What I do remember from the session, that my first session, which was the one after that, was we explored this metaphorical place, and we started with a question, which was, if we were a garden, what would we be?
Right.
And this is where the farm came from, this model farm, this idea of, it was out of that, I think, that this notion of, God, it's hard to know which way around all this stuff was, right? Because I remember us talking about, in this model farm, exploring new types of crop. There was this crop development thing going on, and we were and we were also inviting. There was the potential that we might invite people into the farm. So there was something about working on new crops and then sharing the seedlings and passing them on. And I don't know whether they were meaning, whether the notion of those crops being tools to discover meaning came before or after the notion of the seeds. I can't remember which way around it was, because this is one of the things that happens when we do what we do, right? Which is that things come up, right? And we open ourselves up to whatever any one of us is feeling in the moment, or all of us are feeling in a moment. What images come up, what feelings come up, whatever comes up, what do we see in a space, what do we hear in a space, and at some point you look at it and you go, oh, this is what that means. And you don't always know at the time that the thing's emerging for you what it means. And sometimes you go in with an idea of the kind of thing, and then the metaphor emerges out of that. So it's like, which way round the creation becomes the understanding, or the understanding becomes the creation, is I find that a bit tough. But what's your thoughts on all of that? The first few sessions, like, did I get that right, or did you have a different view of what had gone on in that early session?
I think you got it right. I think what I would like to add is that you're already getting into the details of the story, right? So what I found, like, at the beginning it was okay. I had I had read Ian McGilchrist's book, The Master and His Emissary, right? And he postulates in there, in details, he talks about a lot of things, right? Left, right hemisphere of the brain. But what sort of like got me, and he just mentioned that almost as a side note, is the tendency of the brain to first capture reality and metaphor, right? And so you sort of like when you come from writing and art, when you work in art, you go like, what? What's that? So how do we capture first reality? First, we capture reality as a metaphor. This is what his claim is, and we are doing this in a way so rapidly that we don't even notice it anymore, right? And if you talk to people about metaphor, they tend to be dismissive because for them it's just an analogy. Okay, I know what a metaphor is. It's like saying, this landscape is like a painting or something like that, right? Okay, I know what it is. So I'm just going to dismiss it. So that is actually the left side of your brain saying, I don't need that. Like, I don't know what it is. It's just I know what it is. I don't need to deal with it. But if you think about it, really, it's so interesting. If that is the case, if we really do first see reality as a metaphor and then start to be more detailed and make sense of that, wouldn't be interesting. The assumption was for me always, okay, what does that metaphor show me in the raw material before I distill it into something more detailed? Could it reveal to me something unknown which I've overlooked? Could it show me something surprising? Again, this moment, or could it be the key to being more in the moment, to be more surprised by what happens, all these things? And could it also reveal to me information which points to a certain future? Right, which gives me, so I think the idea was then, okay, if the four of us are a group of people who don't know each other, like before that we've never met, right? Before those sessions we hadn't worked together, we'd never met in person. I found it interesting to ask the group, okay, if this group is exploring and meaning making, and if we are a garden, what sort of garden would we be? What would the garden look like? All right. If that is metaphorically speaking, just to see, does our subconscious produce an image which already points towards a certain direction, which reveals to us information which we don't know? Because we just started to get to know each other. We didn't start doing anything. We didn't do any work together. We didn't produce anything. Right. So we went into that space. And what was interesting, and I think if somebody's listening to this, because anybody can do it, we realized, first of all, anybody can do it. We don't know each other. We're not therapists. We're not trained psychologists. We're not, none of that. We just did it and it worked. And we were surprised. Like, we were people who didn't know each other. And this metaphor of the garden, which we developed jointly, the four of us live, was a space which we felt was alive, which we shared together, which we were all, the four of us were in that space. We had all four of us experienced the garden. And this was a little bit like magic. Like, it was weird. How can four people experience something jointly, have never met each other, haven't worked together, who don't know each other? Suddenly they share.
Sorry to interrupt, but
yeah, sure.
In some ways, we haven't met each other yet, have we?
No, we've never met each other.
It's all been on the internet. It's all been, so, we're all, Heather jokes, doesn't she? We're all these kind of like little boxes.
Right.
And, and I'm sure she said that that she's had dreams.
Right.
That we've been in on a couple of occasions, and we've appeared in boxes for some of them.
Right.
And which is crazy. But the fact that we've been able to do that without being in physical proximity, I think has been great, And the thing that anyone can do it if they're open to it.
Anybody can do it. It's just a question. If we, the group of 4 or 5 or 6, were this thing, this garden or this ship or whatever you choose as a metaphor, what sort of ship, garden, house would we be? And so anybody can do that. And what surprised me, honestly, I was so surprised, is there was this distinct feeling we were all in that space together. I mean, it was clear to me that everybody of us experienced it differently. And I think that's important to notice. Like everybody had a different kind of experience. And I would still say up to today, everybody, everybody would describe the farm differently, but we would still say it's still the same farm. And isn't that interesting? It's like, I was just flabbergasted. I was like, isn't that like reality? Like we all say we're on the same reality, right? We're on the same earth, or if you work together, we're all in the same building, but we just, we experience it differently. So, and metaphorical thinking did exactly that.
Right.
And it opened up the space to say there's space for the individual to have their own subjective view on it, but still you have the distinct impression we're still in the same area, or same, we still see the same thing. And that's very powerful. So it's powerful because in terms of meaning making, you suddenly realize that this seems to be the full substructure of meaning making, which is also can be experienced as a group.
Yeah.
Right. Which isn't real in the sense that you can actually touch it, but it's just as real as reality, in a sense that, again, there's a communal understanding of it, but there's also an individual understanding of it. So yeah. So I'm sure that your garden, your farm is distinctly different from mine. And but once you accept that, also I think that was important for the exercise. I think when we went into that, there was this, and I think I've become a much better person since then, because at first you're sort of irritated. Okay, so when you go into that and you describe part of the garden, I go like there's a voice in my head going like, what's Ben doing? This is stupid. What is he talking about? That's not the farm. The farm looks like this. But when you let go of that, something really weird happens. You just accept that the other person sees it differently. And then it starts to really work. Like it starts to become organic. It starts to flow together. Like your perception starts to intermingle with mine. Which is also something which actors do experience, by the way, coming back to art. Like people who are actors, once they let go of criticizing the acting of the other person, they do experience that communal flow, or that, okay, now we're in the same play. Now we're in the same movie. I don't think about what that person is doing as an actor anymore, or what choices he or she is making. I'm just accepting for whatever is, which you do in reality, well, most of the time. In reality, sometimes you don't accept what the other person is doing. Okay, I'm getting too much details, I guess. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think that kind of, that irritation, and noting the irritation, and also because it is this like invented creative places that you can put anything into it and see what happens. So if you're feeling disgruntled or fed up, or you want to make a change in this imaginary world, well, then you can just change it. So there's a certain amount of freedom in there, and yeah, because I mean, because we're having this sort of discussion rather than playing the game, there's this utility question, right? The usefulness of what we're doing. And I know one of the things that as we were working on this stuff that came to mind for me at least, and perhaps for more of us too, was that this could be a really nice little task for a group of people to engage with, in order to build their own sense of cohesion, sense of culture. You get to know people, but not just get to know them in terms of what their favorite this is or that is, but you get to know, well, in a garden, what would they put and where would they put it? And when they see the thing that you would put in there, how do they respond to that? What do they put around it? How do they move through it? So this thing about getting to know people is is a really, I think, useful, it could be a potential useful useful piece, for anybody doing this. I mean, if you could get, I'm thinking, I mean, I don't know, it's probably way too wacky for my work, I don't know, but it'd be dead fun to try it with work colleagues,
Mm.
and yeah, and anyone really.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, any group which is setting up to achieve anything. All right. So let's say a project or a small business or a team of people could do that and could always, go back to that space even in times of conflict and just give it into that space in some way and look at it again. No, so what you're saying, I think what you're saying is there, what we discovered, I think what we discovered is the cultural subtext, right? The cultural subspace, which is talked about a lot and never understood really, or never quite experienced, or maybe it's more talk like we do now. We talk more about it than we actually experience it. So, but we did something where the cultural subtext is made visible, and
Right.
that is, as far as I'm aware, that's not easy. Like people have been, you know, I have that background, as you said, in consulting and business administration and coaching and leadership and all that. And as far as I can see, people have been struggling with that for some time to say, okay, how do we make the cultural subtext visible for everybody? And
Yeah.
so we found a way how to do that.
Yeah.
Now, are people interested in doing that? Or, well, as you said, we don't know. We have to
Yeah.
see if people are interested in making that sub. But if they are, if they if they want to know, well, now there's a way to experience it and not just talk about it.
Yes.
And also, as you said, get to know, because you said something about getting to know the other person. This is interesting because I think you said somewhere, oh, this is a good space. This is like a buffer space or something like that. It seems to be that we can experience something and the other person in a place which is not harmful in a way that other spaces could be. So there's not this sense, okay, I'm exposing something. Well, okay, okay, now I'm getting from one subject to another. I talked about cultural subtext, and now the risk of that. Maybe we should talk about the risk of the whole thing separately. Because before we get to the risk aspect of it, I was saying getting to know the other person. Yes, and that was also a big surprise. Like I thought that maybe something would happen where we discover ourselves as a group, what potential future we might have. But what I didn't know what would happen is that you start to look at yourself and your own personality structure within that subspace. And you start to understand yourself better.
Right.
And I hadn't really thought about that at all at the beginning. I was going, what? So yes, you get to know the other people in a certain way, but also you get to know yourself better in a certain way, and which has high transformational potential as a process.
I'm just thinking for anyone listening or watching, do you have any examples of that for yourself that you'd be willing to share? Like what was different for you before a given a given point in time, and was different after? What happened before the we engaged in one of these processes, and after? Can you point to anything specific, or a few things specific?
Well, what's really interesting, what seemed okay. So to explain this even more, so we set up this garden, which became a farm, and there was a house on it, and of course we were posing several questions, okay, again and again. So if we were a farm, if we were a family, if there were a war, so each session, which took us around an hour, and we did this once a week, we posed a different question. I think Heather
Mm.
came up with a lot of questions. She was very curious. What if we were in a spiritual community, or what were, so there, she had a lot of questions, and she was curious what the answers were, and we provided
Mm.
some answers. And so and what was interesting for me is, so what you can do with this, with what we later then termed the liminal space, because it's all liminal space, is that it has this kaleidoscopic aspect to it, right? You can look through one lens, you look through another lens, you look through another lens into this space, and it enriches the space each time you look at it, so it becomes more complex, more alive, more fluid,
Mm.
more rich. It spans more time, uh, more colorful, etc., etc. So it no matter how often you look at it, it just gets more.
Yeah.
That every time also you get different kinds of information or insight into that space and about yourself. So that's one thing. But what I noticed is also that certain patterns do emerge. So certain things do seem to repeat themselves and are stable.
Mm.
And for me personally, that was the character which I was in that space, right? So there were some patterns which started to emerge, because just like in life, this character which I was on that farm and so on and so forth always displayed certain characteristics, which I which are my characteristics. And so there was usually some, okay, we got to do something here. This is bullshit. Let's do it. And we got to do this and we got to do that. And, where's the money? We got to make money.
Yeah.
So there was, and no nonsense, hard work. And I noticed that I was going like, okay, so I always have a very similar response to different questions as a character, not
Mm.
not not just not in the imaginary space, but as this character. So I noticed that. Yeah, I noticed that I have a certain view, which is more obvious to me when I look into that space than it's when I deal with the world. So
Mm.
when I look into that space and I see the character which I embody, I see patterns repeating themselves, and these were the patterns. We got to do something. Stop fucking around.
Yeah. Yeah. Where's the money coming from? I
Where's
remember
the
that
money
one.
coming from? Pay
Yeah.
me.
Was that the
Um,
one with the spider? I think that was the one with the spider, was it?
that was the one inspired, and then also the one where I was the actor, and the actor
Oh yeah.
embodying this person, and he said, "Okay, you gotta train, you gotta be tough on yourself, you gotta."
But Jocko McBain.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I thought, oh well, that's weird. Like, why does that keep coming up again and again?
Mm.
And so first of all, it gives you some insight into your own personality structure. So how do you usually solve problems, right? You look at the other people in the space and you go like, but they are solving their problems quite differently. Like, you don't need to do what you're doing, but you're still doing it. And the
Mm.
second thing is, of course, then the question of transformation. Could I also look at the world differently? Like, is there a chance even for me to solve problems differently, to look at things differently? Which I think a lot of people ask themselves and say, okay, is that it? Like, is that my existence? So I always do things in this way, and
Yeah.
that's the end of that? Or is there hope for me to rediscover myself and look also at life and the world in a different way, and have a different kind of experience of life? So is there still hope for that? And yeah, I think the liminal space and the liminal farm gives that opportunity, if you want to use it. Like, you can, you don't have to. As you said, like, if you're I wasn't you said something like, if you're disgruntled with something which is going on in that space, you can change it. And I agree, because at a certain point I was going like, really, that's all? That's always how that's all the
Mm.
answers I got to every problem is, let's do it? Like, that's it? Is there anything else here? Like,
Yeah.
is there somebody still awake? So
It's
yeah.
it's nice because I do feel like I recognize a transition in the way that you play and have done for the across that time. Because some of your some of what's come up in more recent ones, um there has been a shift. There's a lot more laughing and just noting and singing, that's been a thing for you recently, I think, as well, hasn't it? And I hope you don't mind. I don't hope you don't feel like I'm
No.
I'm like, but yeah.
Yeah, so there are, and it's a very long story, but yeah, there were then these moments of transformation of these characters, which I embodied in that space, and that was great. So
Mm.
you can have that transformational experience in a very short time period, I would argue, which other practices, and even like, I don't know, maybe therapy or yoga or meditation, or I don't know what, I think might need a much more longer time to get to that point, right? So of course, and we also talked about that, I think, in terms of what was also interesting for me. I think that we talked about risk and safety and all that, psychological safety, and I think what we've been working a year to, what was obvious at a certain point was, well, usually we just do the things, or our subconscious just enters into those things which it feels safe. So it seems to be a very safe practice as well. That's what I'm trying to say. It's not.
Yeah. Well, it's an imaginary world, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's all made up.
Yeah. You can at any point you can just walk away from it. There's no, there's no right or wrong in it, and you can just say, okay, that was nice and had some fun, and just move on with your life.
And I remember perhaps a few months ago we ended up which might have actually been a mistake, but we ended up talking about each other's like processes, and things did, for me, there was like some friction emerged from that, because it dawned on me that what I was doing was a bit different from what other people were doing, and then I felt there was a kind of expectation on me that I need to be doing something different. And I think another reason, as we're talking about this safety thing, another reason why there is a safety around it is because when you go into the space, nobody knows. I mean, you may not even know, and that's my kind of approach. Is often I turn up and see what happens rather than turn up with a preconceived idea about what's going on. But nobody can know why you're doing a given thing within the world, right? All they can do is, if they're so inclined, is try and think about reasons and try and project them. I mean, I personally, that's not necessarily as much of the, not so fun to be like always trying to second guess what everyone else is doing and why they're doing it. But there's like a buffer. There's a freedom, and you can go in and you can explore some stuff, and like you say, then you can leave, and you can learn a bunch of things about the other people and about yourself, all with a kind of light touch. And so there's this kind of question mark around lots of things, and I think the question mark's really important because why? Well, because, okay, so I mean, at the risk of going too deep, that for me, that's all there is, like a big fat question mark. So kind of underpinning everything anyway. And so kind of moving into that question mark feels like a really important part of it. And not putting, so what was the point of all of that preamble? Trying not to put too many constraints around the thing. Ask the initial question, state the initial question, so everyone feels at least like they know they're occupying a similar kind of, put a kind of boundary around it in that sense. But then beyond that, it's what's happening, have fun, let's see.
I think it's whatever the individual wants it to be. So, and at a time, maybe having this discussion, what is it for you, or what is it for me, or is a good to pause and and sometimes just to say, okay, for me it's that, and that's why I do it, and well, for me it's also this, and that's why I do it. And I think that's not a bad thing to do, probably now and then, just to
Yeah.
touch base with each other and say, oh, now I get it. Now I get it why you're doing that. And I think it was also important for you to say, well, I do it because I enjoy the freedom. So that's why I do it. And this
Yeah.
is a different kind of motivation than perhaps me, who says, well, I'm in it for the I'm not saying I'm in it for the transformation and you're not, but that's what sort of got me going at a certain point, is to see,
Yes.
can I push the limits? Can I push it further than it, or can I surprise myself even more than it already surprised me? Like, I'm always in for the next kick or something. Where's the next thing? And
Yeah.
and
So
and
that.
yeah, so that was what got me going. And you could just got to realize at a certain point that that's also okay. So whatever your where your journey takes you, that's where and everybody's journey can. That's amazing that also the process, and within this 1 year process, everybody's journey can be different. You
Mm,
don't have to have the same journey for everybody. Like, it is just a different journey for everybody else. And it works. It's crazy. Like, how is that possible? Like, there is something slightly prescriptive and unifying where you could, you can push it off, you can give some, but at a certain point it starts to move up by itself, right? So yeah,
yeah.
it's again, there's this that's sort of like a second layer of this, accepting that each individual has their different subjective perspective, not just within the liminal, but actually within the process itself, and why certain things are happening for that individual. And
Yeah.
even if you accept that, it gets better for you.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
which sounds, all of it's, it sounds maybe even corny, but that's how it is. And
Yeah.
it's yeah, it's a well, and coming back to the question, well, can some things also go wrong? I mean, we did have that experience with another group where I wouldn't say it went wrong, because it was more like a learning experience, but I took away from it I did take away from it some lessons. For example, I'm not sure in a group this would work if one of the group members would decide not to participate and just comment on the process. I'm not sure that would be helpful, because
Yeah.
um, I don't know. I'm not sure. I just wouldn't recommend doing that. So if that happens, I probably would say, well, it's better if everybody participates and not
Mm,
just somebody stands on the sidelines and comments what people are experiencing, because then it becomes, I don't know, it just becomes a bit strange. I wouldn't recommend doing that. It's like if you're in a play and you're working with other actors, and then there's one actor who just decides, I'm not playing today. I'm just going to like comment on what you guys are doing on stage and telling you if this is good or stupid. You would go like, excuse me, what's going on? So
yeah. Well,
yeah,
the person you would expect to do that in an acting setting is the director, right?
yeah,
And which actually is kind of embedded in the word direction, begins to detract. I totally see that, because if there's somebody on the sidelines just watching and commenting, they there's now a foreground, to use more kind of artistic metaphor, there's a foreground background relationship between that person and everyone else, right? And so the the commenter isn't actually the artist. They're not partaking. What they're doing is experiencing and commenting like a kind of art critic or something. And it's a different role. And artists are meant to be scared of art critics to some degree, right? And so, yeah, it doesn't work when people are fearful,
yeah,
because if there's somebody hanging around watching and making comments rather than just inputting into the process, there's like a kind of judgment
yeah,
angle. There's a yeah.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. And the judgment isn't, I would say, is not conducive in the moment. I think that, as I've said it before, there is always this aspect of judging yourself and others. And I've just seen for myself that it's better to overcome that, to step deeper into the process, be it in acting or now in what we call the liminal farm. And you can see it in yourself, but also in others if they try to reflect on too much on what is happening to them. Like, oh, I'm experiencing this because, or I'm experiencing this, so it has to mean. So, and this sort of like pulls them immediately out of the process. It's like an actor trying to act and role and then interrupting himself and going like, the way I just played this character was, that's because, and commenting on the word and then going back. So that, it's not helpful. It's not helpful for the art or. So, and here it's the same thing. And, having that somebody stand, but the person on the sideline, as you said, could be that in the future or in a different kind of setting, that there could be within a group coaching setup, there could be that kind of role. There could be somebody who is participating on a way, but also commenting in a constructive way, aware of the general dynamics. Right, so taking care of the dynamics, and then you would have like this group facilitation thing, similar as you do have in the coaching process, that then you do comment somehow on what is being presented to you, right? So, and which is then also expected, that the person says, okay, I'm experiencing this, and then is expecting some sort of mirror or some sort of reflection process and some more questions and some inquiry, which we did later as just some process of inquiry, because later on,
I would add that we were doing that, but we would leave it to the end.
Oh yeah,
right. Like there would ordinarily, there'd be like we'd get on with our thing, and then there'd be a little period, and there'd still a little period, maybe 15 minutes, where we talk through. Where we kind of look back over, and we talk through, even if it's just a few comments on how good it was, because it is great when you're in the middle of it. Like I just find it so much fun. Like that's the other thing too. The freedom and flexibility, and the being able to just turn up and be in a place with other people without that fear of judgment, where you're all just getting on with creating something together, or separately if you want, however you want to do it within the frame of the world. And even in that, and in fact this happened a couple of times, where yourself and Heather's characters were kind of doing these quite really interesting things, and my character, well, that's probably me a bit too, was feeling a bit like tense and stressed about the fact that people weren't working together on something, which has happened in a few previous other ones that happened in other places. But then my response then isn't to like take the ball and walk off and say, oh, I'm not playing. My response is, well, like, what do I do with that in the world? How can I take that kind of sense of unease, and how does that play out in the world? What goes on in there? So it kicks up. There's funny stories. There's I think one of my favorite ones was where, because the other thing about the Liminal Farm is, quite soon after we'd had our first few sessions, we also noticed that what was actually going on was that there was a sitcom taking place, right? So the farm wasn't just a farm, there was a sitcom about a farm. And so all the characters had their own life and their own world, but then there was the actors who were playing those characters. And then we found the producers. So the producers and the actors and the characters were all together. And before we even got to there was the monks as well. That was great. That all of that was just, and I'm going to come back to something about the monks as well, but I'll do that later. But and one session we had was we were noting all of these different layers. So we had the farm, the sitcom, the actors, the producers, and we had the people at home watching the TV show, that the imaginary. So we had like 5 or 6 different frames to look at simultaneously, and that was just great fun. That I really enjoyed, just trying to work out what was going on in any given moment, and like it was very. I found that really, really interesting. The thing I wanted to say before about the monks was that what's also great is that the 4 of us began to just introduce these concepts into our everyday speech with each other. So we talk about things being, for example, monkish, right? So in the story, you know, we played one where we asked, if we were at war, what would that be like? And the people on the farm were at war with these nihilistic monks who want to feed all. Yeah, it was like nihilistic, but also kind of mechanistic monks who want to take everything and write it all down and solidify it and concretize it almost. And we began describing things as being a bit monkish, right? Like, so for me, if things were starting to get a bit tight, I'd say things like, oh, that feels a bit monkish. And you all would know exactly what I was talking about. And
Yep. I think
that I found really fascinating, because it's like we've invented this world, and there's a metaphor has emerged inside of it to mean something that only we know about, and we can use that word to communicate with each other. And like these little like little cultural artifacts kind of start popping out, you know. Oh, not to mention the other things that we, you know, like there's been some poetry that's come out of it as well, hasn't there? And then these films that we've been getting up to, and little bits of art that are links to it. It's like there's a sense of, Nathan describes it as a swirl, doesn't he? That was, and I like that. There's a kind of little, I don't know, like a little package of moving stuff.
I think the monks, as I remember correctly, they wanted to extract meaning from everything,
right?
and just feed it to a monster, which we call the Hydra. So just to destroy it in some way. So because and it was interesting. Again, it's an interesting universe. Like if you talk about universe building, and to say, okay, what our purpose was as a group is to create crops which, you know, can create meaning, and these are the farmers on the Liminal Farm who want to create these crops and be an example, and you know, who are they fighting against? So of course the antagonists have to have exactly the opposite interest, right? And we never sat down like script writers do and say, okay, who are the antagonists? They have to have the opposite interest. They have to fight them over the same thing. Okay, meaning is the center of this farm, so they have to have antagonists who want also meaning, but for a different reason, to destroy it. And no, it just grew organically, like a farm situation. It just came, I don't know from where, and so it just and it fit perfectly into the existing universe, right? It just docked on perfectly, and we never questioned that. Oh, now there are these monks, and they have these flying monasteries or flying fortresses or whatever, and they fly around them.
Talking pigs as well were a feature, weren't they?
Talking
animals,
pigs. And but yeah, they were there to suck meaning from the world and just get rid of it. And we felt that was an adequate representation, metaphorical representation of of the world of social scientists, of science in general, to say, well, there is no meaning in life beyond what you can measure and see and all that. And so these monks were in representation of this explicit, rational way of living. And these farmers were, of course, not as powerful as these monks, and were more or less on the losing side of things, but you know, still persisted to do their farm and got away with it somehow. And you're right. So now when we mean something, you know, hyper rational or rationalization, we don't say we just say monkish. So
Yeah.
we have that cultural reference when we just use that instead of going into all the details what we actually mean by it. And it seems to be very fitting. And yeah, so there's a metaphor within a metaphor within the metaphor, and it all flows together. It seems to be making sense as a universe. And why did I say that now with all this, the meaning, the war over meaning? So this mechanistic way of looking at the world, and then this more like organic, communal, that things are grown, they're not made, way, so
Yeah.
these two worlds in conflict somehow, and we never quite resolved it. We were always hoping that somewhere we'd find a resolution also for those two worlds.
Yes.
Yeah. And
Yeah. I think
now
they
what
had
I
to
want
make peace, didn't
yeah
they?
that
That was a theme of
when
the
could they
monks and the
make peace?
farmers, and
But yeah,
how.
then
Yeah.
the question was also, we were part. So yeah, just to get it. So the antagonism, right? So what was also astounding for me, that you could explore the antagonist within you by embodying one of those antagonists, like one of those monks. So if you, Ben, or me would be one of the monks, who would we be?
Yes.
And so we described ourselves within that antagonistic world. Who would we be, sucking meaning out of the world? Like, what sort of character would we embody? And again, there, the interesting thing is, yeah, you would say, yeah, that is a part of me. That is actually that part of me which
Yeah.
doesn't believe in meaning and would like to see it destroyed, and is
Yeah.
chasing after something which is not meaningful. So that is where I see that part of myself again. So in terms of self exploration, you could see it your you could see it, you could see yourself in different aspects, as the protagonist, as somebody who wants a meaningful life, and then as the antagonist, somebody who's chasing after something entirely different and doesn't want to have meaning in their life. And you can make a decision. Who do I want to be? Do I want to be this person, or do I want to be that person?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or could I somehow consolidate them into a third thing, merge them into something? So
Yeah.
that's so it's a good way to look at certain questions in life, right? So that was amazing. So what started out as the question, what would be, the war, the conflict, basically was again about ourselves saying, okay, who would I be in that conflict? How do I contribute, you know, in that conflict with parts of my personality even?
Yeah.
Who would I be as the antagonist in a story?
Right.
Why
Yeah.
do people fight me? Why do people hate me?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And you can look at it and you go like, okay, now I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that thing of just answering the questions, why don't people like me? Oh, here's a list of reasons. It's not quite the same as like, it's almost kind of like you're asking the creative part of yourself, or the emergent. I don't know where this stuff comes out, wherever it comes from. I suppose the unconscious might be a word for it, or something. But rather than just be like wordifying and codifying, but exploring an imaginary world with yourself or your character, it gives you a different set of yes, it's a different way of looking at the same problem. Like, there's a different whole heap of different information. We've been toying more recently with like sensation, haven't we? Like bodily sensation, and asking the question of like, how does it feel to be in the world?
Mm-hmm.
And then kind of, I suppose, doing that meditative thing of like trying to feel into what's going on in the body and what's happening in the breath and all of that, but not in a kind of like linear way, but just what's happening, and that combined with the kind of visual imagery, it does feel like it's very distinct and different from this. Here's a reason, here's a reason, here's a reason, and I can write them in a list,
Mm-hmm.
and like tick them off somehow. There's like a there's gestural stuff, and there's motion and narrative, right? So it's not just there's this reason. It's also, well, yeah, there's like a sense of a thing shifting over time, taking on a different form, changing its color, changing how it feels, like physically feels, changing. So it's like there's so many more angles to capture the whole thing. It feels like there's more to grab onto.
It's very fluid and it's very much alive, and
Yeah,
I would also say it's a more proper representation of your experience of life than a
right.
list. So you always sense that, okay, so if you have an exercise like, okay, list now the 10 attributes which you're not happy about and let's start working on it, you already immediately feel this is not true. This cannot
Right.
be the truth.
Yeah,
Like you can't put life in a list. This is just,
yeah,
okay, I'll do it, but it's actually a waste of time. So I'm just going to
yes,
do it because somebody told me now to do it, and let's run with this, because I don't know. I also don't know what else I could be doing in this moment.
yeah.
So I don't have a better
I mean,
answer.
yeah. I mean, maybe
So,
that stuff works for some people, but I've noticed for me that I can only get away with the list thing, like before I start getting some pushback, like internal.
mhm.
It just doesn't want to, like, whether it's just a sensation of feeling bored of doing this now, whether I forget the list, or but personally I get this, like, there's just yeah, and I think you're right, there's this sense of it just not being real enough, like it doesn't capture reality, and there's something in me that knows that, and yeah, it lets me know that there's something about any next action that if it comes from like the bottom up, it comes up from your feet and out of your guts and out of your imagination, that it's more likely to happen. Like if you've got it in, got it in your, yeah, in your body, or in your, as a story, or as a, as a symbol, rather than, oh, here's some lines of text on a piece of paper.
Yeah, because it's sort of very very reductive, right? So it sort of plays into what we said at the beginning, is to, okay, we want to make things explicit. We want to get a grip onto them. We have to get into a certain level of abstraction to do things, to come to decisions, and all of that is fine, right? It's nothing, you got to start somewhere.
Yeah, and if it works for you,
Yeah,
and yeah, brilliant.
that's okay. But again, if you would have an approach which shows you things in more in a complete way, or gives you at least that opportunity to understand things more as a whole than it's just parts of it, I would then argue for that and say, that could be more interesting, more transformative, more exciting, more engaging, more fun.
Yeah, and
All
as a
these
result,
things.
more useful as well, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
in terms of utility.
definitely. So, yeah. So, and this wholeness is very important to me, because I've worked also with a lot of other techniques, and they tend to be reductive, and they tend to reduce the personality to aspects and then
Yeah.
and concepts, and they squeeze you through a concept, right? So they say, okay, this is my concept, now squeeze your personality through that concept, and then I can tell you who you are and what you need to do. And yeah, I don't know, I don't believe in that anymore that much. So, and then people say, okay, but a metaphor is a concept, but then you go like, I don't know, I think it's more like a way to experience reality, and just try it and see if it does something for you, right? And if you feel it's a concept and restrictive, well, that it shouldn't be like that. Then maybe there's something
Yeah.
wrong, I don't know, but it
And
shouldn't be
what,
restrictive. There should be a sensation of freedom.
for sure, but also we call the thing metaphorical thinking, but that isn't all it is. It's not like we're
No.
just looking at things and going, what would a metaphor be for that? Oh,
Yeah,
that'd
yeah.
be a good one. Tick. What would a metaphor be for that? Oh, that'd be a good one. Tick. We're not doing that.
No,
Like, we're toying with it, and there's a sense of moving into the metaphor, and like having a look around in our minds, in our imaginations, and having a sensate around as well, like and that's very different from, that's not just, oh, a metaphor is another way of saying the same thing. No, there's something about the exploration of the world that's distinct from that. And I think if someone were to, I don't think it would be right to reduce what we've been doing to just making metaphors.
No.
You know,
I'm just looking at the time a little bit and thinking
Yeah.
that maybe we should sort of like find an end to the session today. I mean, we have a
Yeah.
lot of other stuff still to talk about, and
Yeah.
but yeah, and it's a good that you bring it back to the term metaphorical thinking, and so I'm just wondering, how can we today get an end to this conversation?
Let's just end it. This will do.
All right,
And
so,
let's
right.
yeah, this now's the time, and then we can start the next one next time, and that'll do, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
So thanks a lot. Yeah, thanks for the conversation, and all the good memories which came up.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great. I look forward to the next one.
Yeah,
It's nice looking at it like this.
Yeah, there's it's wow. Yeah, it's very, very, very helpful. Yeah. Yeah. Okay,
Great.
so we'll do that again.
Nice one. Yeah.
Okay. Bye.
See you then. Bye-bye.